Thank you. In the absence of Lieutenant General Matakata, I want to greet you all today and also protocol observe all senior officers of the South African Police Services and all police officers and members of the community. It is a privilege and honor for me today to share with you briefly my 29 years journey receiving men incarcerated in terms of many different types of crime, but many crime against women and children. And today we are standing together to fight against gender-based violence. And the question is always, how do we do this? And today I want to share a few thoughts with you, not just how do we move forward in terms of fighting against gender-based violence, but it's also important to find out where does it come from, because that is also important. Because gender-based violence, it's a deep-rooted problem in South Africa. Often we see the news, there is reports of females and children who gone missing. And we meet up with those incarcerated that was responsible for that. And so we look at gender-based violence as it described as follows. This violence includes verbal, emotional, sexual, physical, and psychological abuse. I don't know, men, if you realize the difference between male and female, where male is ready for action, what he see, where a woman is more ready how you touch her. And that is so important. Women want to feel love and respected. And it not just grab you and saying, hey, come here. Or hey, sexy girl, you look so good. You know, women wants that cuddle. That is what they want. Therefore, the emotional abuse is also the way we can look at women, especially our wives and our girlfriends. The look already is scary. Okay, so that can be easily linked to psychological abuse. And that is what we need to address here today. I read up a little bit about the causes of gender-based violence against women and children, and it linked in with what I want to share with you, how we look at this process. There are several reasons why perpetrators resort to gender-based violence, and there is no easy way to answer this. Some of these occurs during marriage or relationships, and also cultural differences. On the other hand, the woman is seen as meek and powerless, but today I want women to rise up above your own circumstances and to say to men, you are not weak and powerless. Because I'm married also to an Umfundisi, and she's involved in the female correctional centers. And the way I see that woman of God, I still need to get where she is today spiritually. She's a strong woman, not weak. And you don't have to fear. So women, you need to understand today, you rise up above your circumstances. On the other hand, the woman is seen as also very emotional when it comes to Johnny Green Eyes. You know what I mean? Okay, Mr. Sexy. You know what I mean? And Mr. Sexy with his flashy car and his firearm here next to him and the gold and the silver, and Susan is ready for Mr. Green Eyes. And then you become weak. But you don't know Mr. Green Eyes. You need to understand where he comes from. A report by the Center for Studies of Violence and Reconciliation stipulated that growing up with an absent father, or with a father who does not display a positive role in the household, can also cause an individual to become violent. And so I will share with you more about that in a little while. I've got here a piece of paper with a drawing of a very good tree. The Department of Social Services came out with a statement many years ago. Our homes should be the cradle of nurture. Our home should not be a place where our children want to be on the streets. Our home should not be a place where our children feel more comfortable and more safe on the streets than in the home. The home should be the cradle of nurture. And what needs to take place within a home in terms of the roots of the upbringing of that child is that child needs to learn to experience love and nurture. Some years ago, I called in a mother to Baltimore. Her son had already 23 cases against him, 23 years old. I called the mother in because I want to know, where does this son's behavior comes from? The first thing that the mother said, without realizing how she heard her son before, she said, "This boy don't appreciate me because I was raped and he was born. I choose to bring him into this life and he must appreciate that." The son's response was, in this consultation, "Mommy, at the age of 9, I run from school. I come and tell you that they bully me at school. And then you tell me, go fight your battles outside." And he gathered his brothers in his school, his friends, at 9 years old, and they became one of the biggest gangs in that community. And when he started with crime and his criminal behavior, and his mother is now upset with him, his mother will tell him, "You're a rape child." And then this boy said, "Mommy, this is why I don't want to be in this house." And it was a sad situation. But children in our homes, we are responsible for our children because we can't allow that our children becomes perpetrators of gender-based violence. I don't know if you know Ted Bundy from America, who was executed about 24 years ago. The night before his execution, he was charged with 28 rapes and murders. He was sentenced to death. The night before his execution, he called on for Dr. James Dobson, a psychologist, and he said to Dr. Dobson, he said, "I never realized and I never found out really why did I have this behavior." He said, "But when I came onto death row, when I realized what caused me to commit this kind of crime, as I listened to people also on death row," and he said, "Dr. Dobson, my problem and my friends on death row's problem was we started with pornography under the age of 13 years old. And we started to test it over the last 22 years at many correctional facilities right through the country. When we're dealing with sexual offenders, although it's not an excuse for crime, but when we deal with them, we found that many of them were sexually abused by family members. Hurting people hurts people. I'm going from here to another correctional facility where I was busy with sexual offenders. And I brought in two women who was raped 25 years ago and 22 years ago. When I met with these sexual offenders 3 weeks before the time, they all told me they're not guilty. But when these women that are not fearless anymore, when they step in and tell their story, 11 sexual offenders were standing in front of them and said, we are guilty. And we must take responsibility. And that is why time don't allow me to give you all these details of what should happen in a home. And what is not happening in a home is, as we heard, and many researchers will tell that across the world, no loving father figure as a role model. We are doing the restorative justice and victim offender dialogue process across the world. We can step into any correctional center in any country. We will find that 95% of men and women come from dysfunctional families. 95% of men had no loving father figure as a role model. That's the challenge. Being neglected, bullying at school, ignored, all kinds of abuse, and then you see the behavior. The scary reality comes from a psychologist, Dr. David Laken. Dr. David Laken looked at the behavior of people. And Dr. Laken found the antisocial behavior in children comes from poor parenting, absent fathers, inadequate mothers. And he said that the trademark, the behavior of such children comes out in 3 ways. He said one of the behaviors is fearlessness, the second one is aggressiveness, and the third one is sensation seeking. We tested that with drug lords behind bars. We tested it with generals behind bars. We tested it with any kind of gangster in your communities that's now incarcerated. And they will say that this is true because we coming from this kind of homes. And so I close this side, and I just want all of us to know today that we need to take responsibility for our homes. We need to take responsibility for our families. We can't turn a blind eye. When we call on families, especially when it comes to sexual offenses, you realize that the family split. Some didn't want this case to go forward. Others want the case to go forward, and there is conflict in the family. And one day, a young lady confronted a mother in the correctional center at the female side, and we had this process of dealing with all challenges of the past, and she had the opportunity to ask her mommy, "Mommy, did you know that my 2 cousins sexually abused me between 6 and 9 years old?" And mommy said, "Yes, my child. I had to cover for my sister because I thought you will forget about this." When you experience sexual offense as children, male or female, it is a killer in your mind. It destroys you. And that's why when we see women and children being abused with violence, we need to stand up. Because our South African Constitution gives victims rights. And so, now that we know that the nurture must be at home, and we can even link our home as a community, as I will come to that in a little while. If you're a victim of gender-based violence, you know that you have the right to be treated with fairness and respect and dignity. It's your right. The right to offer information. The right to receive information, because the question that many people coming into correctional facilities, when we do a victim offender dialogue process, the victims want to know why. Why did you do it? One lady said once, we grow up together in the community, we were in school together, and yet you had the audacity to bring your friend with you to rape me. Why? That question needs to be answered. The right to protection, the right to assistance, the right to compensation, the right to restitution. So if you are a victim of crime, you need to know your rights as well. Therefore, we want to give you a sign of hope. The prisons in South Africa is now moved away from the concept of prison. And maybe not all of you will agree with this, because you also feel that the perpetrator, also in terms of gender-based violence, they need to rot behind bars. Lock them up and throw the key away. But while there is so many dads behind bars, their children is now growing up fatherless. So it is just that effect all the time. And so we want you to know today that judges and magistrates do not say that we're sending you to prison to be further punished. The punishment was for you to be removed from society as the perpetrator. But then you come into a correctional facility for one reason, and that is for your offending behavior to be corrected. Over the last 29 years, dealing with victims of crime, the community, and the perpetrators, if we still even had, as many people call for it, the death penalty, many families and victims' questions would have never been answered. And we're dealing with severe cases of murder and rape and violence. And so we teach them that crime damages relationships. You need to think different about crime. You need to take responsibility for your actions. You need to understand the damage that you cause can last for years, because when we touch base with victims of crime, after 20 years even, they will share with us as if it happened the night before. I close the process of healing and restoration. Ladies and gentlemen, police officers, when you catch people and charge them for any kind of crime, you don't have to feel embarrassed. You don't have to feel guilty that you're taking a father away from his family. If they found guilty, they have to come to a correctional facility that we can work with them, the social workers, the psychologists, the chaplains, and then all case intervention officers can work with them so that we can send a healed father and mother back home. I had once 2 pedophiles on my process, and I sat with them and I taught them what I studied at the Queen's University in Canada about circle of accountability. And I said to them, if you want to survive and never commit crime again, wherever you go, you tell people that you were identified as a pedophile. And they did that. They 15 years clean now. Never commit such crime again. If you go to my office at Paulsmoor, you find 18 men and women working at my office at the training center at Paulsmoor that was formerly incarcerated and even formerly gangsters. People that are hope, but we need to stand together. And so we know what victims experience, we know their emotions, we know what victims want. Victims want perpetrators to take responsibility. So I want to say to you in the next minute as I close, that I think we need to come back to the values of Ubuntu. I'm taking Ubuntu very serious. As I'm taking the Word of God serious, I'm taking Ubuntu serious, especially for our communities. And I want our forefathers to be proud of us when we think about the Ubuntu concept of sharing, of humanness, of caring, of respect, of compassion. Ubuntu determines and influences everything a person thinks, says, and does. The communal life is the foundation of society in the spirit of family. Let us not turn a blind eye on gender-based violence. Let us rise up against any person, even if it's my brother, even if it's my son. Don't turn a blind eye, because the emotional damage and scars will just hurt other people as well, because hurting people hurts people. May God bless you as you journey on, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you.